Dear conference participants, let me present a report to you. Accumulation of heavy metals by different representatives of biota in the operation zone of the Prydniprovska thermal power plant. Next slide, please. Various types of natural minerals, including hard coal, are intensively used by the industry of Ukraine and its energy complexes. The operation of industrial and energy complexes lead to technogenic stress on natural and artificial ecosystems. Ecosystems are mostly affected negatively by pollution of the air basin with dust and gas emissions. The toxic substances found in these emanations include heavy metals. Together with dust emissions, they enter the soil as the habitat of most representatives of the biota. Degradation of natural vegetation begins ever during the construction of industrial enterprises. In the future, the state of the environment will worsen. The effect of constant, even one-time dust emissions can lead to catastrophic consequences. Therefore, these forms of anthropogenic impact on the environment that positively regulate the balance of functioning components play a significant role. Next slide, please. Heavy metals are accumulated by plants in their roots and leaves. The processes of their absorption by roots and leaves are different. In the first case, the ion passes through the cell wall, and in the second, through stoma or through the cuticula of the epidermis. Together with the transport metabolites are part of the accumulated toxic substances in exported. The cuticula, the thickness and the chemical compositions of which on the outer surface of the epidermal cells varies greatly depending on the type of plant, its age, systematic position, living conditions, and act. Consistence of cutting impregnant with wax and in is a complex mixture of long-chain alkanes, ketones, complex acids, and carboxylic acids, which is a universal adaptation of plant to environmental conditions. Next slide, please. The nature of heavy metals, migration along the trophic food chains of the animals, namely the invertebrate inhabitants of the soil and litter, and the determination of threshold loads both in individual taxa of animals and for the ecosystem as a well arises interest. The purpose of study was to establish the future of heavy metals accumulation in various components of the ecosystems, soil, plant, animal, in the area of Prydniprovska regional thermal power plant operation. Materials and methods. Materials of plant and animal origin and soil sample were used for the research. Representatives of soil and litter invertebrates, samples of soil and salt-forming corals to determine the content of heavy metal were selected in artificial plantation of Robinia pseudoacacia located in immediate proximity to the Prydniprovska thermal power plant in Dnipro. Areas with artificial woody plantations are at a distance of 30-40 kilometers from the thermal power plant were used as a control. At the same time, the direction of the winds was taken into account. Soil samples were taken at a depth of 20 centimeters. The roots and leaves of the main regional salt-forming grass, Angustifolia and Elytrigia repens, was used for ecotoxicological studies. For the determination of the taxonomic composition of soil and litter invertebrates and the selection of material of animals, the ecotoxicological studies, barbaria traps were used, taking into account the functional affiliation of insects. The content of heavy metals was determined only in Hysterida, Carabida, and Carambicida. The statistical analysis was performed using the program Statistics 6 for Windows. Next slide, please. The determination of heavy metals content in the invertebrate animals, tissue, plant, material, and soil was carried out by the method of atomic absorption, spectrophotometry, according to the standard methods. The coefficients of biological absorption of heavy metals by the roots and leaves of the experimental plant were calculated. To detect the processes of root barrier in the experimental plant, the root barrier coefficient was calculated as the ratio of the element content in the roots to its content in the above ground organs. Next slide, please. The bioaccumulation index as the ratio of the heavy metals content in the invertebrate representatives to the heavy metals content in the objects of their nutrition or habitat was calculated. For representatives of saprophags, the ratio of trace elements in the soil habitat, and for zoophags, the trace elements content in phytophags representative Carambicida as potential objects of their nutrition was calculated. Next slide, please. Results and discussion. In the course of experiment, different intensity of the elements accumulation by vegetative organs of different type of plants was rewarded. Those in the control area, a significant content of manganese and copper in the roots of Angustifolia and manganese, zinc, and copper in Elytrigia repens was noted. In the experimental plants, an accumulation of manganese was observed in the substantive path for Angustifolia, copper and zinc, Elytrigia repens. The leaves of zinc, copper, cadmium, and lead exceeded the reference values. Next slide, please. In this slide, we can see figure 2, the content of heavy metals in various components of ecosystems under conditions of environmental pollution по angustifolia. Next slide, please. In this figure, we can see the content of heavy metals in various components of ecosystem under conditions of environmental pollution, electric weapons. Next slide, please. Along with plants, soil invertebrates are an integral part of the biota in artificial plantation of Robinia pseudoacacia in the area of Prydniprovska thermal plant station operation. It was found that in artificial planting of Robinia pseudoacacia, the population of soil and litter invertebrates is represented by crustaceans, molluscs, arachnids, and insects. They are characterized by high number species, richness, and diversity of functional groups. In all Robinia pseudoacacia plantation, the greatest taxonomic diversity is among representative of the class Insecta, Scarabidas, Staphylinida, Carabida, Sylphida, Tenebrianida, Historida, Carambicida. In animals selected in the area of influence of the Prydniprovska thermal power plants and in the control area, zinc content for representative of Isopoda, Carambicida, Carabida is almost the same and has the levels 18.1, 19.6 milligram kilogram. Next slide, please. In this slide, we can see average strength of heavy metal accumulation by representative of soil litter invertebrates in artificial Robinia pseudoacacia stands in area of Prydniprovska thermal power plant operation. Next slide, please. Accumulation of heavy metals by representative of soil and litter invertebrates occurs in the process of their nutrition. Each animal performs its ecological and geochemical functions, taking part in the cycle of trace elements. Vertebrates feed on invertebrates. In this way, toxic microelements accumulated by invertebrates enter trophic food chain. In the process of research, the feature of the heavy metals accumulation by invertebrates, which belong to such functional groups of zoophags and saprophags, were determined. The index of biological accumulation by representatives of individual taxa belonging to certain functional groups was calculated. In this figure, you can see index of biological accumulation of representative of soil and litter invertebrates in artificial Robinia pseudoacacia plantation in the area of Prydniprovska thermal power plant operation and its control areas. Next slide, please. Based on the conducted research, it was established peculiarities in the accumulation of heavy metals by the main salt-forming cereals, depending on the level of soil pollution, on the planting of Robinia pseudoacacia in the area of the Prydniprovska thermal power plant operation. It was found that in the soil of the experimental site, the content of zinc, copper, cadmium, and lead exceeded the reference indicators, and the axis was significant for manganese and nickel. The peculiarities of the heavy metals accumulation in the above ground and underground part of the main salt-forming grass growing on the thermal power plant territory was revealed. Soil litter invertebrates living in Robinia pseudoacacia plantation in the area of Prydniprovska thermal power plant operation and control sites accumulated heavy metals. Certain taxa of soil and litter invertebrates, Carabida, Carambicida, can be used as bioindicators for the state of the environment. Thank you for your attention. Please send your questions and proposals for the cooperation to the following email address.